Welcome viewers to Theek TV. Today we are going to continue with our lesson. Last time I called it EP1, but we'll be calling it Lesson 1, Lesson 2 as we continue. And as we start our lesson today, remember to like, subscribe, press that bell so that you'll be getting notifications anytime we post. So today we are going to talk about pteridophytes, or the vascular plants, where remember last time we talked about the bryophytes. The features of the bryophytes and the importance of the bryophytes. So today let's focus on pteridophytes, or the vascular plants. So pteridophytes are also known as pteridophyta. They're also known as pteridophyta. They're also known as pteridophyta. These are group of vascular plants that belongs or reproduced via spores rather than seeds. So this type of plant reproduce via spores rather than seeds. They are more advanced than bryophytes. So if you look at the structure of the bryophytes, the structure of bryophytes and the structure of the pteridophyte, you realize a difference. The pteridophytes are more advanced compared to bryophytes because they have vascular tissues. So what makes pteridophytes to be more advanced is the presence of xylem tissue and phloem tissue. So xylem tissue and phloem tissue makes up what we call the vascular tissues, the vascular bundle. Now, but they do not produce flowers or seeds. So Mark, in this type of plants, the pteridophytes, they do not produce flowers or seeds. This group includes ferns. We have ferns in this group. We have hostels and club mosses. So if you look at the club mosses, the ferns, the hostels, these types of plants, they do not produce flowers or seeds. They do not produce flowers or seeds. And a good example here is the ferns, the hostels, and the club mosses. So let's look at some detailed features of pteridophytes. What are some of the detailed features of the pteridophytes? Presence of vascular tissue. So pteridophytes has got what we call the vascular tissues. And this vascular tissues is the one that makes them appear complex or be complex compared to bryophytes. Now, pteridophytes have well-developed vascular tissues. They have well-developed vascular tissues. The vascular tissues comprises of the xylem and phloem. Now, what is the function of xylem? Xylem transport water and dissolved minerals from roots to the rest of the plant. So the work of this xylem is to conduct that water, and mineral salts from the roots. And remember, these mineral salts are absorbed by the tissues in the roots. Phloem transports organic nutrients like sugars. Sugars is a product of photosynthesis during the manufacture of food. So transport organic nutrients like sugars from photosynthesis throughout the plant, and the photosynthesis takes place in the chloroplast. So the vascular tissue comprises of the two tissues, that is the xylem tissue and the phloem tissue. And the presence of these structures or these tissues in what we call pteridophytes makes them look complex and compared to bryophytes. Now, this vascular system allows pteridophytes to grow taller and larger than bryophytes. Why? Because they're able to conduct water and mineral salts to the long distance of that particular plant, enable them to colonize a wider range of environments. So the rate of growth of the plants, or the height of the growth of the plants, depends on the presence of the vascular tissue, since this vascular tissue is able to conduct that mineral salts and water, is able to translocate food substances to other parts of the plant. If a plant is unable to do that, to conduct, if a plant lacks this tissue, you realize that it cannot grow at all. It cannot grow at all or a long distance from the ground. Number two, second feature, true roots, presence of true roots, stems and leaves. The presence of true roots, stems and leaves gives a complex feature of the pteridophytes. So pteridophytes have true roots that anchor them to the soil and absorb water and nutrients. So they have true roots. The purpose of the true roots is to anchor, to hold this plant family in the soil, to support the plant. The other also main function of these roots is to absorb water and nutrients. They absorb water and nutrients from the soils. They have stems which may be underground or rhizomes or above ground that support the plant and transport nutrients. So the purpose of this stem, so this stem, remember the stem comes, the stem connects the branches and the leaves and the roots together. So they have stems. The stems may be underground as rhizomes or above ground, so that support the plant and transport nutrients. So it appears at within the roots and the leaves, the branches and the leaves. So it also facilitates what we call transport of nutrients, and also provides support. It holds the leaves, or it exposes also the leaves to the environment. They have leaves, often large and complex, especially in ferns, where the leaves are called fronds. Now, ferns, the leaves of a fern are called the fronds. These leaves are capable of photosynthesis. So the leaves are exposed in the atmosphere or in the environment, or to the environment, for photosynthetic purposes. The leaves of ferns are called the fronds. If you look at that structure, you can see the plant. You have the leaves there, the flower. You have the stem section. You have the roots, and you have what you call the primary roots there. You have the secondary roots. You have the tertiary roots. If you look at those roots, another diagram here, you have the flowering column there, mature leaf. You have the daughter plant. You have the internodes there, the node, the crown. Have the sunset leaf. Have the internode, advantageous roots. So that is in monocot, and the other one is in dicot. Simply try to see. So if you look at the primary root is in case of the dicot is the taproot. That primary root is the taproot. If you look at that stem, the stem comes within the roots and the branches and the leaves. So it provides also a conduct, or also facilitating transport of substances or nutrients. Another feature here, we talk about reproduction via spores, and we say that the pteridophytes reproduce via spores. So pteridophytes reproduce by spores instead of seeds. They reproduce by spores instead of seeds. So spores are produced in specialized structure called the sporangia. So that sporangia is a structure that produces what we call the spores, often located on the underside of the leaves. Often we look at more on that when we'll be looking at specifically reproduction in plants. We'll look at all those structures. In ferns, sporangia are grouped into cluster called the sori. Production called the sories. Under that, you can also say the alternation of generation. They also show what you call alternation of generation. The life cycle, this is what you call the life cycle, is seen in pteridophytes. That life cycle is seen in pteridophytes. Now, as we had talked earlier in lesson 1, the sporophyte or the diploid generation is dominant as and is the visible larger plant, that sporophyte. And the gametophyte or the haploid generation is small, often heart-shaped and short-lived. It produces the gametes. The gametes here talk about the sperm and the egg for sexual reproduction. Talk about the sperm and the egg for sexual reproduction. Now, alternation of generation. The sporophyte, which is the dominant phase. In this case, the sporophyte, which is the dominant phase, the larger vascular plant that have commonly recognized as the fan or hostels, produces spores in sporangia. So that sporophyte or the dominant phase in the larger vascular plants have recognized, or the fan, for example, let's talk an example of the fan or the hostel, produces spores in what called sporangia. So sporangia is an organ that produces the spores. Gametophyte, the independent phase, is a small, often microscopic plant called the prothallus in ferns that grows from a spore and produces male and female reproductive organs. The male and female reproductive organs here, we are talking about the antheridia and achegonia. We're talking about antheridia and achegonia. And for that to happen, you remember when we were talking about this, the features in the first lesson, for fertilization to take place, there must be water. So water is necessary for fertilization in this case. So sperm swim through water to fertilize eggs, because their fertilization depend muchly on presence of water. And that's why these plants, most of these plants survive in areas where there is water, or in wet or hydrophyte areas, since their multiplication depend on availability of water. So they can say depend on moist environments for reproduction. Number 5, distinctive feature of ferns. These are distinctive feature. Now, these are the key things that we're supposed to be looking at. Now, let's look at these distinctive features of the fern. What distinguishes these ferns from other plants? Fronds, large divided leaves. New fronds emerges as fiddle heads, coil structure that unfurl as they grow. So the presence of fronds, like in ferns, that is a distinctive feature of fern. We have rhizomes. The fern has got the rhizomes. These rhizomes behave like roots. Underground stems that ferns often use to spread horizontally, producing new fronds from the soil. We have the sporangia in sori. Ferns produce spores in class of sporangia called the sori, located on the undersides of the fronds. You can look at these pictures. You have the pinnae, you have the rachis, the iron, you have the fiddlehead. You can see that the rhizome, we have the root, the slip, we have the blade. If you look at that structure better. Now, let's look at the distinctive features of the hostels. The Equisotophyta is under class of Equiso or subdivision Equisotophyta. Now, jointed stems. These hostels have what called the jointed stem. The hostels have hollow jointed stems that contain silk, giving them a rough texture. So if you touch that particular the hostels, in some rare environments, in some environments are very rare, but if you look at the structure or the appearance of the plant hostels, have small scale like leaves, and photosynthesis occurs primarily in what we call can say hostels have hollow or jointed stems that contain silica, giving them a rough texture. So the process of that silica gives them a rough texture, then reduced leaves. Hostels have small scale-like leaves, and photosynthesis occurs primarily in green stem. So the stem part of that hostels is green, is where photosynthesis mostly occur. Strobile or strobili, the spore producing structure, the sporangia, are organized in cone-like structure called the strobili. So in this strobili is where the sporangia are organized, and the work of the sporangia is to produce the spores. which take part in what we call production. The distinction feature of the club mosses, we have the Lycopodia fighter. These are Lycopodia fighter. Some of the distinctive features here, if you can look at that picture there, we have small scale like leaves. The club mosses have small, simple leaves called the microphyllus, which have a single vein. If you look at the structure, maybe you can zoom that better. So the microphyllus, which have a single vein. So this one have got also a single vein because the leaves are small and scale-like. Yeah, scale-like. And they also have what you call the strobili. Like the hairstyles, club mosse produce parenchyma in cone-like structure called the strobili. They also have the strobili. The strobili is the organized sporangia which produces the spores. The habitat of the pteridophytes. Pteridophytes generally prefer moist, shaded environments, though some can live in dry habitats. Their dependency on water for production often restrict them to humid or damp areas such as forest, wetland, and riverbanks. So that can also be taken as a disadvantage because these pteridophytes, they depend on water for reproduction. Therefore, that limits them. They cannot spread to the other part of the environment or to the other part of the land. So they can only survive in areas where it is the humid areas or damp areas, the areas that is wet, or in forests, the areas that is wet, in wetlands, and in riverbanks, since they rely on water. Advantages of pteridophytes. What are the advantages of these pteridophytes? One, vascular tissue allows for taller growth. The vascular tissue. So, due to the presence of that vascular tissue, they can grow tall. They can grow, unlike the bryophytes that they only grow on the underground or on the ground, since they lack vascular bundles. This one, they can grow tall because they have vascular tissues that enable to transport substances. Two, another advantage, they have what called true roots. The true roots provide better anchoring and nutrient uptake. They have true roots. These true roots enable them to absorb nutrients, absorb water. These true roots also provide anchoring, support, or they hold that plant family, therefore provide support for that plant. True roots allow pteridophytes to anchor themselves securely in the soil and access water and nutrients from deeper layers of the ground. So due to those, they are able to get the resources, they are able to get the water and the nutrients underground. 3. Efficient water and nutrient transport. Efficient water. And we say that the efficiency in transport is because they have what called vascular tissue. So vascular tissues enable more efficient transport of water and nutrients, allowing these plants to survive in a wide range of environment than bryophytes. So this one, they can a bit survive in a wide range of environment as compared to the bryophytes, especially in areas where water is not always abundant at the surface, but at region, the swampy region. Sporophyte dominancy, another one, another, can say another advantage. The sporophyte dominancy. The sporophyte generation is the dominant and more complex phase, allowing for greater reproductive success and the ability to produce and disperse large numbers of spore because of that presence of the sporophyte dominancy. So that sporophyte generation is the dominant and a more complex phase where it allows what we call for dispersion. So when reproductions, the greater the reproductive success, the greater the area of disperse, so they are able to spread out because of that. Colonization of diverse habitats, another advantage. So you realize that pteridophytes can grow in various habitats. So they can colonize various habitats, including temperate forests, tropical regions, and sometimes even semi-arid regions. So they are able to colonize different areas that exhibit the climatic favorable regions. So they can grow in various habitats, including the temperate forests, tropical regions, and sometimes even semi-arid regions. Some species can tolerate marginally dry conditions due to their root system. So the survival capability of this particular type of species depends on their roots. Disadvantages of pteridophytes. What are some of the disadvantages of these plants? Remember, from the structures of the plant, we are able to get the disadvantage. Number one, dependence on water for production. So that means that if there's no water, these plants cannot reproduce. And if it cannot reproduce, that also limits what? Dispersion. Now, pteridophytes still rely on the presence of water for fertilization, since their sperm must swim to reach the egg. This limits their ability to live and reproduce in dry or arid environments, so they cannot disperse in those areas because there is no water for fertilization, so reproduction is limited. Two, spores have limited dispersal capacity. Spores, while numerous, have a limited capacity for dispersal compared to seeds. They must land in favorable conditions for the gametophyte to grow, and this stage is highly vulnerable to environmental conditions. So this, if they land in the wrong region, in dry area or semi-arid area, they cannot grow. So they rely also on the water. So they must land in region with favorable condition. Gametophyte vulnerability. The gametophyte phase of the life cycle is small, delicate, and short-lived, making it highly susceptible to dry out and being affected by environmental changes. So the life cycle is very short, and it is delicate and short-lived. So that makes it highly susceptible to drying. So they easily get dry. Therefore, that limits the vulnerability or limits the spread of this particular species of plant. Lack of seeds. Unlike seed plants, pteridophytes do not have the protective advantage that seeds offer. The presence of a seed in a certain plant can make the generation of that plant continue successfully, or can also make dispersal and distribution of the plant, the probability of that plant to disperse is high. But in this case, pteridophytes do not have the protective advantages that seeds offer, such as food storage for the developing embryo and the ability to remain dominant until conditions are favorable. So that feature is a disadvantage to this plant. So it limits a lot of things. It limits the what we call dispersal. It limits the production, the distribution of this organism to the different environment in the ecosystem. Number 5 here, limited ecological range. While pteridophytes can live in diverse habitats, they are most abundant in moist shaded areas. So they are more concentrated, or they are more grown in moist areas and shaded areas, like in forest. Their reproduction depends on water, therefore limits the ability to colonize drier environments compared to seed plants. So even if you look at if you work on terrestrial environments, large part of terrestrial environments, you'll find that is not covered with the pteridophytes, because they have specific favorable environment. They need water, they need very moist area, shade. That's the areas where the pteridophytes can survive. So example of pteridophytes here, as we had mentioned earlier, we have the ferns, you have the hostels like club mosses. Example of common club mosses here, we call Lycopodium clavatum, common club mosses. We have this Selaginella, the spike moss. Now, some around the features. Vascular plants, they are vascular. They have xylem and phloem. reproduce via spores. They do not produce seeds. Instead, they reproduce through spores that develop in sporangia. The spores are developed in sporangia, so they are a product of sporangia. True roots, stems and leaves. They have true roots, stems and leaves, sexual alternation of generation, water-dependent reproduction, diverse habitat. So those are the summary of the features of pteridophytes. So pteridophytes are significant for their evolutionary advancement over bryophytes, but they still face limitation compared to seed-producing plants. Which limitation? Remember, they rely on water. Reproduction relies on water. Growth and survival lies on the presence of water and wetness. So that's a limiting factor. Now let's talk about spermophytes. The spermophytes. Spermophytes, also known as seed plants, represent a highly advanced and diverse group of plants that reproduce via seeds. This one now, they are more advanced compared to bryophytes, compared to pteridophytes. They are highly advanced. They are so-called the seed plants since they produce seeds. Advantages over spores. Now, seeds provide several advantages over spores, such as better protection for the developing embryo and the ability to remain dominant until conditions are favorable for growth. You can take this example. Maybe you planted a maize, you've harvested that maize, now you have the maize seed. You can store that maize seed and plant when condition is favorable. So that maize seed goes to a stage of dormancy. So that's an advantage for spermatophytes compared to pteridophytes, compared to bryophytes. Now, the spore producing plants, so these spermatophytes are more advanced and have several advantages because of seeds. Now, spermatophytes include both the gymnosperms, e.g. the conifers, and the angiosperms, the flowering plants. So the angiosperms, we call them flowering plants. Gymnosperms, they don't produce flowers. And they dominate most terrestrial ecosystem, the terrestrials. If you look at the large area in terrestrial ecosystems covered by the spermatophytes, they cover a very large area of the land. What are the key features of these plants? One, presence of seeds. Seeds are the primary reproductive units in spermatophytes. A seed contains embryo, the young developing plant. The embryo is the young developing plant. Seed coat, protective layer that shields the embryo from damage, desiccation, and unfavorable conditions. So this seed coat covers the embryo. So this seed coat performs this function. One is a protective layer that shields the embryo from damage. Two, from desiccation, and three, from unfavorable condition. Endosperm or cotyledons. The seed also contain the endosperm or cotyledons. Cotyledons, nutrient-rich tissues that nourishes the embryo during early development. This endosperm, it contains nutrients-rich tissue that nourishes the embryo during early development. So during the development of that embryo, it requires energy, it requires food. Where does it get food? Food is stored in endosperm or in cotyledon. Endosperm or cotyledon. Seeds offer a significant evolutionary advantage because they protect the embryo and also allow it to remain dominant for long periods of time until conditions are sustainable for germination. And that's why when you harvest maize, you don't just plant after harvesting. You give that land time, since the seeds are able to stay dormant at that particular period until the favorable condition for that particular plant. or seed to be planted. Another key feature of spermophytes, you have the vascular system. The spermophytes possess a well-developed vascular system consisting of xylem, and we said that the function of the vascular system remains the same. Xylem conduct water and mineral salts from the root to other parts of the plant. Phloem transport or translocate sugars and nutrients produced by photosynthesis in the photosynthetic cells. The photosynthetic cells, we talk about the chloroplast here. This vascular system allows seed plants to grow larger and thrive in a wide range of habitats, from deserts to tropical forest. You look at the structure of the xylem and phloem, transport water and mineral salts. So this is a one-way upward flow from the roots to the other parts of the plant. Transport is bulk flow due to negative pressure. Hollow dead cells, no end walls, form corner of the vascular bundle, rich in lining which support the plant. That is the xylem. The phloem transport food in the form of sugars. Two-way flow, up, down. Transport is by osmosis, that is the Tagger pressure. Live cells with no nucleus, perforated end walls. So those are the features of this vascular tissues, the xylem and the phloem. Another feature, true roots, stems, and leaves. They have roots which anchor the plant and absorb water and nutrients from the soil. Stems support the plant and act as the conducts of transporting nutrients between root and leaves. It acts as the conduct of transporting nutrients in the leaves. Leaves, the primary site of photosynthesis, where light energy is converted into chemical energy or sugar for the plant. So the leaves, they are exposed in the atmosphere for maximum light and for photosynthesis. Another key feature here, how reproduction. Reproduction is by seed. Spermophytes produces seeds instead of spores. They undergo sexual reproduction. They undergo sexual reproduction, typically involving male gametophytes, which is the pollen grains, and female gametophytes, which is the ovule. So male gametophytes, the pollen grain, develop in male reproductive structure, that is the anthers in angiosperms, pollen cones in gymnosperms. Then female gametophytes, which is the ovule, contains the egg cell, which are fertilized by sperm cells delivered by pollen. Remember, the pollen tube develops at the center of the stigma. So we'll discuss more about that when we'll be talking about reproduction in plants. After fertilization, the ovule develops into a seed, which will germinate into a new plant. And remember, the ovule is the one that develops into a seed. About the ovary, the ovary develop into fruit. Can mark that down. Number 5, the feature number 5, dominant sporophytes generation. Now, in spermophytes, the sporophyte generation or diploid is dominant, meaning the main plant body we see is the sporophyte. That main plant body is the sporophyte. The gametophyte generation, which is the haploid, is highly reduced and often microscopic, existing only within the reproductive organs of the plant. So you cannot see that. That is, maybe you can see it through a powerful microscope. It's a microscopic. A microscopy means a very tiny substance that cannot be seen with the naked eyes. Number 6, advanced reproductive strategies. The pollen grains are specialized to structures that carry the male gametes. Unlike pteridophytes, spermatophytes are not dependent on water for fertilization because pollen can be transferred through wind, water, or animals. That is pollinators. Pollinators here we talk about wind, water, or animals. You can also use another term as agents of pollination: wind, water, or animals. So that's advanced reproductive strategies. Pollen grains are specialized structures that carry the male gametes, are like pteridophytes. Spermophytes are not dependent on water for fertilization because pollen can be transferred through wind. It can be the wind carrying the pollen grains, can be water. When they fall, the pollen grains fall on water, carried away by water. Fertilization will take place there. Or animals. So these are agents of pollination. Seeds provide protection and nourishment for the developing embryo, allowing it to survive harsh conditions. What provides nourishment in the seed? Endosperm, because endosperm carries the nutrients for that particular, or the food for that particular growing embryo. Spermatophytes have developed specialized structures for reproduction. Flowers in angiosperms attract pollinators and aid in the transfer of pollen, because if you look at the flowers, some of them have very colored petals that attract flowers. The cones in gymnosperms protect and develop seeds. Now, classification of spermatophytes. Spermatophytes are broadly classified into two main groups. The gymnosperms. The gymnosperms, seed plants that do not produce flowers or fruits. So, in another word, remember in primary, you are talking about the gymnosperm. This term gymnosperm simply referred to non-flowering plants. So, these are plants that do not produce flowers or fruits. So, these are non-flowering. And any non-flowering plants cannot produce fruits because it doesn't have the ovule, doesn't have the ovary. Remember, the ovary develops into fruits. The ovule develops into seed. The seeds are exposed or naked seeds and are not enclosed within a fruit. The gymnosperm include the conifers. The conifers, good example of the conifers, go and observe the trees like pines, the firs, the spruce, cypress. How the cycads, ginkgos, the genotophyte or genetophyte. Now, angiosperm, seeds plants that produce flowers and fruits. We are talking in primary. This is what you call flowering plants. The angiosperm, the flowering plants. The seeds that produces seed plants that produces flowers and fruits, because they have ovary that contain ovules. Ovules develop into seed, ovary develop into fruits. The seeds are enclosed within a fruit, which develop from the ovary of the flower. Angiosperms are the most diverse and widespread group of plants. They are divided into two classes. Now, we have what called monocotyledonae. As a class, the plant is a monocotyledon. So we have monocotyledons, the monocots, and dicotyledons, the dicots. So monocots or monocotyledons are plants with one seed leaf. They have one seed leaf. You can also say one cotyledon. Parallel vein leaves or parallel veined leaves and flower parts in multiples of 3. Example include grasses, lilies, orchids, grass, maize. Those are monocots. Dicots or dicotyledons, plants with 2 seed leaves or 2 cotyledons, net veined leaves, and flower parts in multiples of 4 or 5. Example include the rose, beans, and ox. See that? Gymnosperm, the features, the gymnosperm here we talk about features the naked seeds. Features of the gymnosperm. Gymnosperm, we say that they are non-flowering plants. Naked seeds exposed on the surface of the cone scales and are not enclosed within a fruit. We have the cone bearing. The gymnosperm typically produce cones, male and female. The male cones produce pollen, while the female cones produce ovules, which after fertilization develop into seeds. So they are cone-bearing plants. Needle-like or scale-like leaves. Many gymnosperms, especially conifers, have narrow, needle-shaped leaves that produce water loss. So most of these plants you'll even find them in dry land, in semi-arid land. Wind pollination. Most gymnosperms rely on wind for pollination, which involve the transfer of pollen grain from the male to the female core. Wind pollination. Features of the angiosperm. Features of the angiosperms. Flowers. Angiosperms produce flowers which are specialized. Reproductive structure. So the flower part of the angiosperm is the reproductive structure of that particular plant. Flowers attract pollinators such as insects, birds, or bats. So those are the pollinators. Those are like agents of pollination in the angiosperms. Fruit production. After fertilization, the ovary of the flower develops into a fruit. That's after fertilization. Remember, we're talking about the flowering plants, which has the ovary. The ovary, inside the ovary, get the ovules. After fertilization, the ovary is going to develop into a fruit, and the ovule is going to develop into what? Seed, which contain the flower attract pollinators such as the insects. We've done with that. After fertilization, the ovary of the flower develops into a fruit, which contain and protect the seeds. So fruits also aid in seed dispersal by attracting animals or by other mechanisms, e.g. wind and water. So you realize that this seed, because it has a protective layer, can also be dispersed through wind. Broadleaf forms or broadleaf lamina. Most angiosperms have broad flat leaves or leaf lamina, though some monocots, e.g. grasses, have narrow blade-like leaves. Diverse pollination mechanisms. In addition to wind and water, angiosperms often rely on animals, pollinators, for pollen transfer, which increases their reproductive efficiency. And remember, most of the angiosperms, they form fruits. For example, a mango is a fruit. So when you carry that fruit, you eat fruit, you throw away the seed. That seed is going to, when it gets a favorable conditions, it will grow in another region. So it will have been dispersed by animal. Example of this spermatophytes have the rose, the oak trees, wheat, sunflower, and orchids. Advantages of spermatophytes. Seed production. One of the advantages of this type is that they produce the seeds, and seed provide protection and nourishment to the developing embryo. We talked about that. Efficient reproductive strategies. Pollen grains protect the male gametes during their transfer, reducing the need for water-based fertilization, unlike bryophytes and pteridophytes. Pollination mechanism, that is wind, water, and animals, allows spermatophytes to reproduce efficiently in diverse environment. Wind range of habitats, or the wide range of habitats. The presence of true roots, vascular tissues, and leaves allows seed plant to thrive in a variety of habitats, from dry desert to wet tropical or tropical forest. Wide range of habitats. So they cover the wide range of habitat. Dominant sporophyte generation. The large and complex sporophyte generation is well suited to terrestrial environments and allows for better competition with other plant species. We have fruits and seed dispersal. These are the advantages. In angiosperms, fruits aid in seed dispersal by attracting animals that eat the fruit and transport the seeds to new locations, enhancing the plant's ability to colonize new areas. Disadvantages of the spermatophytes. 1. Dependency on pollinators. Like angiosperms, they highly depend on animals. So some angiosperms rely heavily on specific pollinators, e.g. bees, birds, for reproduction. If these pollinators decline, the plant species may also face reproductive challenges. 2. long time to maturity, so they take very long time to mature. Many spermatophytes, especially trees, take a long time. You can imagine how a mango tree, if you plant a mango tree, a mango seed here, how long will it take to start producing the mango, so that you can get the mango seeds? So many spermatophytes, especially trees, like trees, take a long time to reach maturity and produce seeds, which may be disadvantaged in rapidly changing environment. That's why people are going for the GMOs, genetically modified seeds that take a very short time to grow. Vulnerability to climate change. Some spermophytes, particularly gymnosperms, are slow to adapt to rapid environmental changes, making them vulnerable to climate change. So they take time to adapt. That makes them very so vulnerable. Now, summary on pteridophyte features: vascular plant. We talked about that. Seed producing, dominant sporophytes, regeneration, pollen grains. Those are the few things you go through. Wide variety of pollination mechanism like wind, water, or animals. Assisted pollination. Classification divided into gymnosperm, that is the corn-bearing plants, the angiosperm, and the gymnosperm, and flowering plants, the angiosperm. So spermophytes have successfully adapted to nearly every terrestrial environment and have become the most dominant group of plants due to their reproductive efficiency, seed-based survival strategy, and advanced vascular system. Now, as we finalize, let's look at characteristic of a class Monocotyledonei. We say that the angiosperm is divided or is classified into two classes, the Monocotyledonei and the Dicotyledonei. So Monocotyledonei, here we talk, and a good example for monocot is maize. One of the features of the monocot is a single cotyledon, has a single cotyledon. If you look at that maize, a single cotyledon. Two parallel venation. If you look at the venation here, the leaves of monocots typically show parallel venation. That's the venation, the veins running. Fibrous root system. Monocots usually have a fibrous root system. If you look at that structure, then you have the scattered vascular bundle. The vascular bundles, xylem and phloems, are scattered, if you look at that case, throughout the stem rather than arranged in a ring. Flower parts in multiples of 3. If you look at this flower, multiples of 3 or 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3. So in multiples of 3 or 6. Absence of secondary growth. Most monocots lack secondary growth, meaning they do not typically produce wood or grow in gut through the formation of ring. For example, if you look at a maize plant, you cannot get a wood on a maize plant because it does not have secondary growth. It does not grow, increase in gut. Narrow or strap-like leaves. If you look at like that one is an epigrass, the narrow leaves. Monocolate or monoscolate pollen grains of monocots generally have a single pore or furrow, monoculate, compared to the trichopate pollen found in dicots. Characteristics of Dicotyledonei. Lastly, two cotyledons. For example, if you look at those are bean seedlings. They have two cotyledons, two leaves. Reticulate venation. The leaves of dicots generally have a network-like reticulate venation pattern with interconnected veins forming a web-like structure. If you look at the venation here, the web-like structure. Taproot system. Dicots typically have a well-developed taproot system with one main root that grows downward and smaller lateral roots branching off. If you look at, these are a good example of a taproot. So a taproot and have some branching on it. Vascular bundles in a ring. If you look at that, vascular bundles in a ring, arranged in a ring. In dicot stem, the vascular bundles, xylem and phloem, are arranged in ring grouped by periphery of the stem. Flower plants in multiples of 4 or 5. The flowers of dicots generally have floral parts, petals, sepals, stems, etc. in multiples of 4 or 5. For example, if you look at in this case, petals form in multiples of 4 or 5. Have this one here. If you look at the petals and the formation of the petals, the carpel and the geranium. Presence of secondary growth. Many dicots exhibit secondary growth, allowing them to grow in girth, producing wood through the formation of vascular camion, e.g. trees and shrubs. They have wood. Broad or net-veined leaves. Dicots often have broad leaves with a distinct branching venation, unlike the narrow leaves seen in monocots. Trichopet pollen. Dicots typically produce pollen grains with 3 pores or furrows, trichopet, as opposed to the single pore or monocoelate in monocot. So that marks the end of that today. As we continue, we are going to continue that topic, the plants, until we cover all the areas in the plant. So I appreciate your time, appreciate all of you. Let's continue following up. More notes are coming, more updates, more lessons are coming. As we are finished this plant section, then we go to animal section, and this lesson will be so beneficial to students, those preparing to do their KCSE. I wish you all the best. Theek TV wishes all the students all the best, as there are those who have studied and those preparing to do their KCSE. May God bless you. Remember, like, subscribe to get notifications on daily updates.